Thanks for checking out the video and jumping back onto my channel for some new content. This is the first episode of a series that I have been planning for some time. As you could probably tell by the intro and by my shirt today, I am a huge fan of The Amazing Spider-Man. I have been a Spider-Man fan since I was a kid, and the idea for this series of videos is to look at Spider-Man going back to the beginnings, a retrospective of the comic books that brought us the Spider-Man that we all know and love today. I know a lot of folks, their first introduction to Spider-Man may have been movies, cartoons, TV shows, toys, video games. So this is my opportunity to take a look back in history at the beginning, and let's talk about Spider-Man. Let's talk about the quirks of the creation of the character, the evolution of the character over the life of the series, and I'm going to be pointing out from an artistic perspective a little bit about how the old comics were created, some of the choices that were made at the time. So again, this is the first episode of my Spider-Man retrospective series. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into the actual comic. Okay, so what we have here is actually a PDF or scanned copy of a scanned version of the original Amazing Fantasy number 15. So this is not a recreation. I don't own this. This is just a computer file, obviously. But someone has gone ahead and scanned the actual comic itself. So this is what it would look like. This is how you would get it if you were a buyer back when this was on the newsstands. So we can see, start with the cover. Interesting point about the cover. So Amazing Fantasy, for anybody who doesn't know, first of all, Amazing Fantasy is an anthology comic book. So what they would do is they would put out this book in Amazing Fantasy, and it might have 2 or 3 or 4, whatever, different stories in it. And that was the publisher's way of sort of throwing things against the wall and seeing what would stick. So you have an idea for a new character, you only have to do 8 to 10 pages, something like that, of a quick story, an introduction, and then if there's a good fan response, people would come back and they would spin it off into their own series or maybe do a little more with it. So that's what Amazing Fantasy is, why it's not Spider-Man number 1 that we start with. The other thing to note here is the interplay between Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. So if you don't know who those two folks are, Jack Kirby is known as the King. Jack Kirby is probably the predominant comic book artist in history. He created, at the early days of Marvel, numerous characters, such as, he co-created Thor, the Hulk, the X-Men, I believe probably Ant-Man, and the Wasp. So, and of course all the villains as well, Doctor Doom, Loki, all the characters that we know. So Jack was instrumental in forging what became Marvel Comics. The other artist that was also very busy and did a lot of work on multiple characters was Steve Ditko. So the two of them both drew early issues of the Hulk. Steve drew some of the some early Submariner, as well as, of course, Jack in the Fantastic Four books. So the two of them will go back and forth in terms of drawing each other's characters and things like that. So this cover, the Spider-Man story inside is drawn by Steve Ditko, but the cover here is drawn by Jack Kirby. And the story goes that Steve did a version of this cover from a different angle, looking down instead of up from sort of the street or a midpoint looking up towards the sky. Steve's was looking down and Spider-Man was swinging up, holding the same villain, and people were below. And for whatever reason, the story is that Stan didn't like that angle. I don't know if he thought it was too busy or what the situation was. And he asked Jack to redo it, similar composition but a different angle. The other thing about the Stan and Jack, I'm sorry, the Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby, it, convalescent? No, the coming together on Amazing Fantasy and Spider-Man. So Jack, again, being the guy that Marvel and Stan Lee would go to for new characters, went to Jack and said, "I have a character called Spider-Man. I need a design for Spider-Man." And Jack came up with a design for Spider-Man, and I'm going to show you that design here. So with this design, you can see in these images, it's very different than what we ended up getting from Steve Ditko. We got something more along the lines of a Captain America that was, more popular, maybe something kind of similar to Sandman, the Golden Age Sandman, something like that, but very, very different. And then Steve is the one who came up with this Spider-Man design that we know. So including the masked face, the web pattern, everything, the boots, the way that the shoulder, the line down the arm from the shoulder to the wrist, etc. So interesting that the first appearance on a cover, the first time we ever see Spider-Man, it's Steve Ditko's design drawn by Jack Kirby. Kind of interesting stuff. I do want to point out a couple of things about this that I like as well. These white speed lines are very interesting to me. That they weren't drawn in, they were done in this white, which would have been a difficult piece to do with the printing technology at the time. Basically, you would have had to sort of print everything around it and leave these streaks of white underneath. So again, real interesting and subtle. And if you've seen this cover through recreations and stuff, I think sometimes they clean that up and you don't see those motion lines. But it really does, when you see it in its original form, it does add that speed and motion that Spider-Man is coming from the right to the left of the page. All right, so let's get into the actual guts of the book itself. And again, because this is a scanned version of the comic itself, you get all these old vintage ads, which I think is really kind of neat as well. So starting here in page 1, I like, and you can see here we go, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Very interesting to use a splash page. So this comic books at this time were spinning out of newspaper comic strips. So if everybody's familiar, or if you've ever seen them, newspapers, I'm assuming they still run daily cartoon comic strips. So think of things like Peanuts or Garfield or Calvin and Hobbes, things like that. It's usually 3, maybe 4 boxes, panels, whatever, with the characters drawn inside and a sort of a punchline at the end. That's what we think of. But in the old days, there were also not comic or comedic comic strips. There were adventure comic strips. You had things like Flash Gordon and Prince Valiant and stuff like that. And those would be ongoing stories of adventure and action through multiple panels and multiple pages. And then every day in the paper, you'd have a new piece of it. So if you had all those papers, you could cut all those pieces, and if you put them all together, say a month's worth of papers, you might have a whole book worth, right? And that's kind of what some early comics were just reprints of old newspaper comic strips in one place where somebody could read the whole story. Here what we have are original comic book stories, and especially in an anthology, like I mentioned, where you only have a few pages, to use one page, take up all the real estate of one page to tell the story. You've got to get it right. And here, in my opinion, they really do. We've got the group of kids here. They're laughing. You can see through their body language and the hands they're being dismissive of this other guy who's identified as Peter Parker. You don't need to know that this has been going on for a long time. You can see Peter's body language, his downturned face, the simple expression. But behind him, we have this shadow silhouette, foreshadowing what's going to happen, which is great. And then with just a few lines, you see Peter's holding books. There's walls. There's a lot of windows. This is a multi-story building with this archway in the front. We can assume that they are at school, and I mean that really just with simple line work, right? We don't have to go into three-dimensional perspective and stuff like that. This is all very flat and straight, but it's enough in the back that it doesn't distract from the art that's telling the story, but also tells us where we are. So it's a fantastic lesson, I think, that we could all probably take from the past that we've sometimes lost here in the present, is sometimes less is more. Simple design like that is great and works terrific as a storytelling device. This is more traditional layout. So these are, so it's only 8 panels. There's another version where you'll see a lot where they would do 9 panels, so 3, 3, and 3. Again, this comes from the newspaper strip. So actually, if you were to cut these up and put them all in order horizontally, I think you'd find that they're all basically the same height panel, even though those top two are a little bit wider. It would line up pretty well so that you could just have them in a line. Again, that's a carryover from the old newspaper comic strip days. Also interesting, and you'll see this a lot in these early comics. It's a lot of what we call long shots and mid shots. So when you're drawing a comic book, you are the cinematographer. So think about TV and movies, about where does somebody put a camera to capture that moment. Is it real close to your face to capture those emotions? Is it really far away so we can see the vista that you're on to see that it's this grand, adventure or travel or whatever? Is it from the top down? Is it from the ground looking up? All these things, all these choices make the storytelling what it is, and that's what the artist does in a comic book. And in this time frame, this is very common. I think it does change as time goes on with Steve Ditko, so I don't think it's him per se. I think Jack Kirby did a lot of the same thing, which is what I said, these long shots or mid shots. So a long shot is where you have the whole figure. So like this center panel right here is a great example of a long shot. We can see both figures from feet to head, and then there's even all the room for the dialogue. And again, some simple lines to tell us that we are at some sort of a building. Again, probably school. Peter has his books, as he always does, and then we have some stairs into an entryway and some bricks, and again, probably school. Very simple storytelling. So that's a long shot. A mid shot would be more of these, like this one here in the science lab. It's from the waist up. We don't see a lot, hardly anything of the background, but enough to know this guy's in a lab coat, so it tells us it's probably science. Peter's holding beakers. One of them has smoke and stuff coming out. So again, that tells us school, science. There's some more glass and beakers down at the bottom, and then a wall and a window. So again, simple storytelling with a few lines, but it gives us what we need with that mid shot. Down here as well as a mid shot, no problem. So not what we don't see are a lot of close-ups. So even this shot here of Peter with the spider in his hand after he gets bitten is closer, but it's still not what you would consider a close-up. A close-up would be where it's almost uncomfortable, right? Like it's really close to the camera. But Steve doesn't do that. So very interesting choices. Again, I love just the simplistic backgrounds, but we still know everything we need to know. This, instead of taking a whole page or the top third of the page or something to establish, here's the science exhibit that he goes to and where they're doing the radiation experiments and where everything happens, he uses a sign. And that, as in terms of a readership, that's all we need. It tells us that's where he's gone, and here he is. It saves so much real estate. It saves so much storytelling. Great, great stuff. Super simple cityscape, up and down rectangles, boxes. We read that as skyscrapers, buildings, and very easy. We don't need to know exactly what building it is, how many windows are there, is there, a reflection in every window and all that. Sometimes, again, less is more, and this is very simplistic, which is great. So let's see, keep going. Really interesting. So I'm going to go back here. So as we come across, when you see Peter being Peter, even in this first example of Spider-Man, this is everything is straight up and down, horizontal, vertical, nice 90-degree angles, right? Even this car here, while it's drawn in perspective, to come at us, it's very narrow, the perspective is very minimal, and we are at a very flat 90-degree angle to this car. We're not looking, we can't see down in it, we can't see up underneath it, where it's very straight on. So this is an important thing to note, because the instant he starts exhibiting his abilities that are derived from the spider, now we start to change the angles. The camera angles change. Here, now we're looking up, and he's climbing the building. Steve could have drawn it to where the building is flat, and we recognize it's the side of the building, and he's crawling up the building. That would have done it. But this is so much more interesting, exciting. It's a more dynamic camera angle, and he does this as Peter is using his spider abilities. The camera angles change. When he's just Peter, as you see down here, where he's watching the wrestler and getting an idea, now we're back to that 90 degrees. Now it'd be very easy to take the camera, put it behind the wrestler, so we see the wrestler holding somebody up, and through the gap you see Peter in the crowd. It's a much more exciting shot. There's more dynamics. It's much cooler, but that's just it. Peter isn't cool. Peter is just a regular dude. But when he's using his power, so we have this upshot. Here we have this upshot of him going up the building with the little kid. Here we're looking down. That's how we can see the top of the building, because we're slightly looking down as he gets to the top and crushes the pipe. This one here, as he's walking down the guide wire, the whatever it is, you can see the buildings are at a slight angle. We're looking up more. And now this is interesting here. This panel here with the spider, this is about as close as we get to a close-up in this issue. So that spider web would have to be super, super close to the camera for the spider to be that big, and for the threads of the web to be that big. And looking through it, we can see Peter down away, and then the city behind us. I really like that storytelling a lot. It's great foreshadowing, and as well, it's very... it's just more dynamic. It's very nice. It's very ominous. I really like the use of the shading, the shadows, and that close-up. Again, here, now Peter's getting ready. He's trying to design a disguise. So again, we're looking up at him more slightly. It's interesting stuff. One of the things to note as well, this right here, Peter breaks the panel, which I don't believe so far any character or any image has done in this book. Why is that important? The panels, the area between the panels are called gutters, and that is just a reading aid to help people understand that this is a moment in time, this is a different moment in time, this is a moment in time. And sometimes that can get lost in some modern comics where people try to get really fancy with the composition and the page design work, but the reality is keeping it simple can, again, be very meaningful for a reader. Now, Peter leaps up over the wrestler, and just his head breaks the panel. It, again, is just a simple tool to show us that he's leaping up. It emphasizes that he is leaping so quick and high that he's breaking that moment in time and leaving the panel. something to use sparingly, where it's really can emphasize some real subtle storytelling. Like he could have had his knee break the panel here, but he didn't. He cut it right there. Again, because now the match is over. He's dropping the guy. Everything is calmed down. But this is your panel of action and movement, and really interesting. That's the one place where he breaks the panel borders. Let's see. Oh, the Dutch angle. Yeah. So this right here, this angle where the ropes are going down and the pole is going out, we know that that's at a 90 degree because we've seen it here, right? It's a ring. It's supposed to be a wrestling ring. But here it's turned on an angle. And why is that important? So that is what is referred to as a Dutch angle. And it's very familiar from a lot of 1960s TV shows, Batman with Adam West, Star Trek. They use Dutch angles, and what it does is it just makes the reader or the viewer feel off kilter. It puts you in a sense of unease, and that's the idea, is that he's sticking and climbing this pole, and it should make us feel as uncomfortable as the wrestler is, because we don't see that viewpoint. We as readers, we can't live that experience. So you use these angles to add tension and drama to a shot, to an angle. So I did want to point that out, the use of the Dutch angles, which I thought was very cool. Let's see. So now we'll go to this shot. And here in this page, we have finally the first sequential appearance of the Spider-Man costume. One of the things I do want to talk about, which I think is interesting, is the fact that there's not a lot of camera variety, is the note that I had. And what I mean by that is, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I didn't use it in these terms. So what you want to do with your storytelling is very much move the camera in and out of the scene to create rhythm and a movement to the storytelling. And Steve does not do that much. The only panel where he does it is here, where he pulls out to a more of a long shot so we can see all of Spidey, and he's crawling up this web that he's stuck to his ceiling. But if you go over here and look at these panels, you could take just about, well, so even these heads here, like, this head under the mask, this guy's head's a little more square, but they're not a lot different in size than the figure here, and the figure here, and here, and here, and here, and here. They're all drawn extremely similar, where the camera is sort of locked down in a spot, and now you're going to act like a play on a stage versus television or movies where you can move in and out. So that's important, and it's something that we'll see develop over time, is more variety with those camera angles. So much of this, he moves, again, sort of 360 degrees at times around Peter. Like here he's behind him and over his shoulder so we can see the webs. Now he moves the camera back around in front. We see how his web shooters work. The camera is above him looking down as he's shooting the webs up. That's great. The camera is low looking at the ceiling. All that stuff is very good. But again, it's all sort of equidistant from where Spider-Man or Peter is, as opposed to coming in closer for moments. So again, we'll see that evolution over time, but it's interesting to see this as a standard kind of at this period in history. Now, one more thing before I move forward is the question about the costume. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit because I want to bring this up. Now, if you ask people what color is Spider-Man's costume, 9 out of 10 times they are going to say his costume is red and blue. And the way it's drawn today, it is clearly red and blue. But in these first appearances, look how much black is being used on the figure. Now, you might say it's a small figure, maybe that's why. Very possible. But this is all solid black. This leg here is almost all solid black, as is this one, as is this arm. So there's only light on this side. To me, this reads as a black costume reflecting light onto the side where the light is shining from. And so it would be shiny. So how do you show something that is black but is also shiny? So in today's modern comics, we could do all kinds of stuff. We can put whiter highlights, we can use grays to show it. We could still use this trick, which is using blue to highlight black, because it's what works. The other reason that I read this as red and black, if you look at Peter's pants in the panel before, his pants are clearly blue. We've identified that, we've seen them in full light, they're blue. Where there's shadow, there's black. But much more where the light hits is all blue. It lights up all this area. Same with the panel above here. This is all lit up, this top is lit up. So the under part where the shadow is black. Here, it's sort of almost the opposite, where most everything is black and only the highlighted part is blue. And we see this throughout the whole thing. I mean, this is all black, it's almost. The inside of this arm is black, so if the light was coming from his right across, or left to right in the panel, then just this side would be lit up and this would all be dark. So that's my feeling, is that it really is a black and white, or I'm sorry, a black and red costume with a blue highlight, and that changes over time. So again, it's going to be really interesting to see that evolution. But that is my take on the black and blue versus black and red. So let's keep moving. So now we have an interesting part 2. So this is already a very truncated short story to get everything in that we need to introduce Spider-Man as a character. But yet at the same time, we've broken it into 2 parts. So we've got how did he get his powers and what does he do after he gets his powers. And again, I feel like the shorter story format, like you could have that first part we just read or just looked at. Peter, he goes to the experiment, he gets bitten by a spider, he has powers, and then he makes himself a costume when he figures out he could make money. And then you could be like, that's your story, and then this could have come in issue 16 of Amazing Fantasy, and then keep going, well, what happened? But they put it all together, and I find that very interesting. I do also want to point this out. So Spider-Man has a spider emblem on his back, and that emblem here is blue. And for me personally, I thought that was a coloring mistake, possibly, in the reprints, because I had never seen the original, as a reader growing up, until I got this PDF copy. I would always have it reprinted in another comic or a magazine, and I said, oh, they must have messed up on the color. Well, you see, it's blue here, it's blue there, and we're going to see it more later. It continues to be blue. So that's a deliberate choice. Throughout the story, it's consistently colored blue on his back. Another sign that the costume is designed to be black, because if it was blue and you had enough light on the back, the whole back would be blue. You wouldn't see the spider emblem. So just a tip there. I also noted in my notes about this that I thought was pretty interesting. Steve Ditko is really good at drawing individual character faces. So this guy is a character. Like, he's got his little mustache, he's balding, the shape of his nose is totally different than this character down here, which is totally different from this guy. He's got kind of like a mug with some weird mouth lips going on. And then this woman here with her hair is totally different than, Aunt May, for example, is another female, even though she's much older, but she looks older. The way she squints and the lines around her mouth and stuff. This guy here, definitely a character. So Steve Ditko does a great job of differentiating all of his characters, even background characters that really, might never play a part. Like some of these people, this guy down here with the glasses watching in the background, he'll never show up again. This doesn't mean anything. But he goes to the point of giving him specifically like these plaid pants and a jacket and the glasses. So really great work there. The last thing here that I want to point out is the creepy pose. So this becomes a comic trope that we see with Spider-Man a lot, whether it goes from Steve Ditko to John Romita to John Romita Jr. to Todd McFarlane to anybody who's drawing Spider-Man today. This is what makes him different from other characters, is that creepy pose. And what he's done here, if you look at it, and we can zoom in some on this, he's really bent the figure in a way that is really unique. So the legs are kind of bent at odd angles. This is a normal angle per se, but the ankle is bent really far, and then the toes. So his toes are the only thing that's on the plane of the wall, which is really neat. That it's, it kind of shows how his powers work. And then this knee is bent so weird, but really does kind of, again, read as spidery, And then same thing, his arms come down and the wrists bend, and then the fingers splay out from there to the fingertips. So you've got nice angles that sort of show the depth of how far away he is from the wall. It's the bend of that wrist and those fingers, and then he's only sticking with the fingertips themselves. So again, creepy and cool. We see Spider-Man gets himself into lots of these, what I refer to as creepy poses, over the years that really become a signature for this character over other characters. So yeah, so that's here. Things are going all right. Again, as Spidey, he gets cool poses, neat stuff. When he's just kind of him, it's very straightforward, as we mentioned before. Again, more into the grid format. Nice montage. Interesting way of showing time passing. So this isn't, he hasn't been Spider-Man for one day. He's been doing it for a while. We can see there's all these newspapers. Who is he? What does he do? He wins an award. People love to see what he can do. And again, that blue spider is on the back of the costume, is continuing to come through. So again, I feel like that tells me it's a deliberate choice. But really neat montage. So now we get back to Peter, and I found this interesting because I didn't notice this for years. But this cop is the same cop here that's berating him for not stopping a burglar. And at first, the reason it took me so long is because there is a coloring error here. So let's go back to here. So if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that this character here has a mustache. He's got a big white mustache. We see the eyebrows, you see the hair, the uniform, and the design of the nose, the angle of the nose and the chin, right? So now if we go back and look at it, and we'll zoom in further here, and I'll show you where the coloring error is. So same nose, chin, it doesn't look like there's a white mustache there. But if we come down here, and again, one more zoom in, we'll see that it's drawn here. You can see the ragged edge of the mustache. You can see this line that would be underneath the crease, the smile crease or the grimace crease or the grin, whatever. This should have been white, and if this was white instead of the same flesh tone, I think it would have been very, very obvious that this is the same police officer that is now telling Peter Parker and trying to console him that his uncle's been killed. And so that was just really neat storytelling. The character's never identified by name or anything like that. he could have been anybody. You could have drawn a different police officer, a younger police officer, a female police officer, whatever you wanted in this. But a really nice storytelling touch to bring that back around, that this is the same guy. So he blew him off earlier, and now it's coming back to roost, right? So here we go. Peter runs out, he runs up the stairs, and now we get again into the more dynamic angles because Spider-Man is in action. He's climbing, he's swinging. We see a down shot of the pier area where he's going to, so he can get there. So you can see the docks and the water. Again, very simplified versions of rooftops and water and dock area, but very clear, simple storytelling. Nice upshot here. Again, the creepy pose. He's up above. Really nice switch of the camera angle here to look down. Very intimidating for, he's the powerful figure, the crook in the bottom, the burglar in the bottom, weak and frightened. Really nice flip and storytelling moment there. And then really fluid poses I like. Let me go back one real quick and see. So yeah, again, the creepy pose, the bent figure, the character trying to run away, and Spidey leaping over. I like the bend. It really feels like he's prepping his body to land from a leap. Really nice bend of the arms and legs there. Really, really cool. And then here, again, real nice. The leg is bent. He's on his toes. The arms are bent. The wrist, he's ready for action. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And then this punch is great. So let's zoom in on the punch here really quickly. You really feel this. There's great motion to this punch. It has power, is my note. You can feel the swing. Now the line work, the speed lines or motion lines around help to sell it. But even if you didn't have that, if it was just a solid background, you feel that punches come all the way across his face, across his body. He's stepping into it with his whole weight, because he's, this foot is off the ground, this foot is off the ground, so he's really pushed off and in mid punch. And this guy's body language of selling is, I'm surprised his shoes didn't come off. He's off the floor, he's almost horizontal. This is great storytelling, great punch, really terrific scene there. And then, interesting, at the final shot of Spider-Man in his full costume, the costume has eye holes and a nose. Now, that wasn't shown throughout the rest of the book. I don't know why all of a sudden. I guess maybe because the face is expressionless. Maybe those tiny pupils are to make it look like he's shocked, and by the identity of the crook. But I remember I've seen this, and they've cleaned it up in some reprints where they take out the eye dots. But I've seen photos of this original like this, and I was just like, wow, that's a bad choice that doesn't stick around. So that's one of the things where, again, you're using this to test this out, to test this product out and see if people will like it. The eye holes in the nose, not a great choice there. So then in the end, we have Spidey walking away down the city into the moonlight. This is another trope that we'll see over and over at the end of Spidey Adventures, because Spidey is truly a hard luck hero. He does what he does, but things don't seem to work out for him all the time in his personal life, and so he tends to walk away in loneliness into the shadows, into the moon, into the city, whatever. So this is a trope that we'll see a lot. So here we go. So it's interesting. At the bottom, it tells you, hey, go see the next issue of Amazing Fantasy for more Spider-Man. So that tells me probably that original plan was, hey, we'll put Spider-Man in a few issues of this and we'll see how it goes. and the response was so big and so immediate that it was clear they needed to put Spider-Man into his own comic, and that's exactly what they did with Spider-Man #1. So that is Amazing Fantasy 15, and we'll go back to here. So the history is incredible. There's so much that was all laid down in terms of the character, the look, Peter's bad luck, his family situation, his social status situation, his sense of responsibility, the way his powers worked, kind of what he could do, what he couldn't do. So much is all laid down in just those few pages of that story that has spawned all these different things, whether it's, again, movies, TV, video games, cartoons, toys, spin-off characters. You know, lots of there's a ton of other spider characters that have all come out of the Spider-Man world, and it all started right here with Amazing Fantasy 15. So I hope you enjoyed our look back. I thank you again very much for checking it out. I will have more, so we'll continue to look at the issues starting next time with Spider-Man #1 and working our way towards some of today's comics. So thank you for checking out my Spider-Man retrospective video series. If you liked it, please do thumbs up, like it. I appreciate that. Feel free to leave any comments about anything I may have missed or anything, any information that I wasn't aware of. I do read all the video comments, so please let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe if you like the video. That way you'll know when the next one comes out for Spider-Man #1. Thanks. I look forward to seeing you all again with some more Spider-Man.